Hi, Rabbi Skolnik here. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to share some thoughts of Torah with you on Parashat HaShavua, which this week is Parashat Bo, the third parasha in the book of Shmot, telling the story of the Exodus. In this morning's Torah reading, we conclude the saga of the 10 plagues, which I want to bypass for the moment to come to a secondary issue in the parasha that has to do with our introduction as a people to the idea of historical memory. We have in Rabbinic Judaism the idea of Pesach Mitzrayim on the one hand and Pesach Dorot on the other, meaning when we say Passover in the year 2012, we tend to be referring to a festival where we gather the family together for seders and we have specific associations with it. But that's a Passover festival that is, of course, thousands of years after the Passover story itself. Parashat Bo gives us the fundamentals of Pesach Mitzrayim, which is the story of the Exodus as it happened in real time. And not only do we read the conclusion of the plagues and the actual leaving of Egypt by our ancestors, but there is also in Parashat Bo an injunction to us for millennia to come to celebrate the anniversary of the original Passover with a ritual unique to the holiday. So in the time of the Exodus, on the day before they were to leave, the Israelites were commanded to slaughter a lamb and to spread its blood on the doorposts so that the angel of death would know to pass over the homes of the Israelites when the firstborn of the Egyptians were being slain. And that is, of course, the antecedent, the historical antecedent of the command that is to follow, namely that for all generations to come, at least when the temple existed in Jerusalem, that a lamb was to be slaughtered, not to spread the blood on the doorposts, but that paschal lamb, if you will, was going to be the substance of the feast on the night of the 15th of Nisan, when the Israelites left Egypt and when they celebrated the anniversary of leaving Egypt. And we're given the command of Haggadah, in and of itself a command. The Torah says, what happens when your child asks you, what is this ritual that we're doing, the slaughtering of the lamb, and why are we gathered together as a clan? And Torah says, Vehigadeta levincha bayomahu lemor. You shall tell your child on that day, saying, because of all this, God brought us out of Egypt. God brought, for me, as an Israelite, a descendant of Israelites, God redeemed us from Egypt. So we have not only the historical event, but we have the beginnings of a transition into the idea of historical memory, so that every year on the anniversary of the Exodus, we mimic what the Israelites did, except that through the millennia, of course, the practice has evolved. Most Jews don't realize this, but in the time of the Beit HaMikdash, of the temple, what would happen was that the Israelites would bring their Korban Pesach, their Paschal sacrifice, on the 14th of Nisan, and then on that night, they would sit and eat the sacrifice that had been roasted as a clan, and they would talk about the Exodus. And the more they talked about it, the better it was. We live in a time of, we're actually in a post-Maxwell House Haggadah time, when we have a book that sits before us with a fairly standardized text, but we don't always adequately appreciate the fact that the Haggadah is the product of historical evolution. And it didn't exist thousands of years ago. Our ancestors in the time of the Beit HaMikdash, of the temple in Jerusalem, ate of their paschal lamb, gathered as a clan, and they talked about the Exodus. They told stories about the Exodus. They were a lot closer to the event than we are. And the elders shared stories, and the children asked questions. And we have remnants of this, actually, in the Seder. We know pretty much what their menu was on Pesach night in the ancient world. They would eat what we now call a Hillel sandwich. Right? They would take 2 pieces of matzah. There would be a slice of lamb and maror and charoset. That was what they ate in the time of Hillel. That's around 100 before the Common Era. So we see this evolution of traditions of the holiday that has its origins in Parashat Bo. And it's really fascinating to contemplate, as a Jew who lives thousands of years after the story of the Exodus, how it is that we celebrate today, how it has evolved into still a celebration rooted in a clan or extended family, and how we, not only in the words of the Haggadah, but through our own creativity, continue the process of telling the story of the Exodus. We have a text that gives us words when we don't have them. But the more creativity that we're able to show at a Seder, the more we can generate curiosity in those who aren't familiar with the story. Well, in the words of the Haggadah, Harei Zeh Mishubach. That is just that much more praiseworthy. Shabbat Shalom.